If you're watching this video, it is because probably you want to know how to guarantee that you will receive your next grant, fellowship, or artistic residency. Or maybe even how to apply for a PhD program, but that will be another video. Unfortunately, as you may or may not know, there is no formula for that. Each particular case is different, and regardless the application, the contest, or whatever you're trying to get, there is no one single way to write or propose a project. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jacques Zafra. I'm a Mexican composer based in Berlin. I've studied in Mexico, in Germany, and I got my PhD in San Diego at the University of California. I started applying to scholarships when I was fairly young. I was an undergrad student who didn't necessarily know how to write grants, project applications. Nonetheless, I started applying to everything I could. And when you're starting and you don't know how to do these things, I probably do the same thing right now, 16 years later. You search on the internet. You want to know how other people wrote the proposals. You might even want to see how it looks like, how they organize these things, because you have never seen something like this. You might be lucky enough, and maybe some of your colleagues will even show you their projects. You get the PDF, you open it, you read the title, and then you're faced with reality. You don't even know how to title your work because you don't even have a project yet. So you start thinking about, I only write pieces that my teachers tell me to write. So how will it be possible for me to come up with a project? You're young, so you might not even have like a clear artistic identity, which is normal. But then, after hours and hours of searching on the internet and minutes and seconds searching inside of you, you decide that you're gonna name your project 3 Pieces Based on the Rain. You open the computer, you write the title, and you start writing with your very young experience. I remember sitting hours in front of the computer, searching for different documents. Luckily, there's a document in Mexico from someone who took the time to write this document called How to Write Artistic Projects and Not Get Frustrated If You Don't Get Picked. That was very helpful because it outlines a structure. So as a young man, I decided to follow the steps. And unfortunately, I didn't get the scholarship that I was applying to for about 3 or 4 more years. I didn't know what I was doing wrong. I follow all the steps. So I assumed that probably my project was not good enough. So I continued applying until I finally got it. And to be honest, I don't think it had to do with the way I was writing the project, but with my experience. Not my experience as a writer, but my experience as a composer, as an artist. My artistic ideas were not ripe yet. I was very inspired by ideas of other people who had been dead for about 30 years. And so after many years of trying, I finally was able to get not one grant, but a couple of them, including from the Mexican government, the German government, or from my university in the US. So with that moderate rate of success, your colleagues start writing you and asking you, hey man, would you mind sharing your project with me? So one of the things that I consider a big mistake is asking, what kind of project should I propose? And if you don't know that 1 week before the deadline comes, your project might not be strong enough. And the problem with that is that the project, ideally, should precede any application. As an artist, ideally, you should have at least 1 or 2 projects in mind that you would like to realize at some point in your life. Some of you might have projects for the next year. Some of you might plan for projects midterm for the next 5 to 10 years. And maybe some of you have projects for the rest of your life. So think about, regardless at which stage you are at this point in your life, what were the projects that you always wanted to do when you were younger as an artist? Maybe you had some crazy ideas to write a piece for guitar and harp. In my opinion, those are the projects that should be developed not for the next application, not for the next grant, but in general as your artistic project. Of course, if you're in very early stages of your career, it might be very difficult to get money to create a very large project like an opera or a ballet or a long format movie. But those big ideas that you have should be treated like a seed that is growing on you. So for example, if you ever want to write, I don't know, a symphony or a large piece for orchestra, you should try to create the path that will take you there. So you have to analyze what's the most ambitious project that you have ever done and aim to create a project that is at least a little bit above of what you have ever done before. Of course, if you have only 2 reels and you're trying to ask for money to create a movie, they won't give you anything. If you have 3 pieces for flute and guitar, they will probably not give you money to write an opera. So the project should be in line with your capabilities at this point in your career. It should be something that is challenging for you, but that is achievable. It should be a project that builds the path for your ultimate project. This big project that you have always dreamed about since you were a kid. So if you think that you're lacking ideas, let me tell you something. You're not. When I was younger, I used to think that having a successful artistic career meant having many ideas. But when I analyzed the work that I have done in the past, I realized that that's actually not true. Ideas that matter to me have basically stayed consistent throughout my life, even way before I was a music student or a composer. Maybe the projects changed, maybe the pieces changed, the instrumentation, the media, but the underlying questions basically are very similar. Even when you analyze the work of different artists like movie makers, painters, composers, you can see that in the early works, there's some ideas that remained in the later works. They just change, they develop. If you don't look carefully, you might think that they are always reinventing themselves, but in a way they are just evolving. They usually have the same questions, obsessions, and fascinations, just from a different angle. And the application is just this opportunity you have to develop something that you already care about. And I think that's actually very important, because when a project is created exclusively for an application, I think often lacks identity, strength, authenticity. It might be clever, fashionable, it might use the right words, but it might also feel a little bit fake. Because deep down, the project wasn't even born from an artistic necessity. It was born for an opportunity. And institutions change, commissions change, trends dissolve, but the ideas that truly matter to you stay with you probably for the rest of your life. Never think about the funding as the goal. Grants, fellowships, residencies, commissions, institutions, they are tools. They are not the destination. If you start thinking about receiving funding as the goal, sooner or later, you're probably going to start writing projects for the institutions. But if the work itself remains the goal, institutions become one of the many possible ways to support it. The strongest projects are usually the ones that would continue to exist even if nobody would fund them. The proposal itself, it's a creative act. That everything that you do there matters. It's not just the words that you write, it's also how they are presented, how they are structured. Is the document breathing or is it cluttered? I have been part of different commissions, and sometimes you confront projects that you want to die, basically. You might get like 5 full pages with very small font, no spaces, no images, nothing. Just 5 pages of text. And these people are clearly not taking into consideration that in some contest or whatever, there might be hundreds of applicants, and that the people reviewing these things have a limited amount of time. There is no formula. You have to be true to yourself, but let's be honest, it can be optimized. You don't have to fake that you're somebody else because there is always room to improve. So even if you're not taking the mind of the jury into consideration, and even if you're not renouncing to your own personality, there's some things that make the job for the committee way easier. Yes, everything matters, the title, how fast you get to the point, how clear your ideas are presented, how original are your ideas compared to the other participants. But as I already said, you can always improve what you're doing without sacrificing your identity. Think about this document as your own piece, as your own artwork, as something very delicate, as some sort of flower. It needs air, space, water, care. Does luck matter? It does. There are many circumstances that are out of your control. One of the big mistakes is thinking that maybe if your project would have been a little bit different, if you have chosen other words, you would have been the one getting the grant. As they would say, maybe it was not in the cards for you. A project can be excellent and still not get the grant. It can be pretty bad and still get funded. It is possible that with the same proposal, you might get chosen the next year. It depends on who sits in the jury, who is in charge of the organization. And this is a question I actually have heard a couple of times. What does the jury want? You either know who the jury will be or you don't. If you don't, well, the simple answer is don't even think about it. And if you do, then it gets a little bit trickier. The problem about thinking about the jury is that you start thinking about what would they want instead of what do you want. And for me, as an artist, that is a problem. I think the only thing that matters is what you care about. If you start thinking about the jury, you might come up with ideas that don't have anything to do with what matters to you. Maybe you're not a political person. Are they going to want someone who is politically engaged? You might start changing your language because you may think that they will want something different from you. And you might start changing your own ideas to accommodate the idea of the jury that you have. But that may or may not be true. You don't know. That's the point. A couple of years ago, I was participating in what for me at that time seemed to be probably the biggest project I could ever be part of. At the IRCAM, at the Pompidou Center in Paris. And I started writing a piece that I thought would please the ensemble that was going to choose the pieces that they were going to perform in this space. And as we would say in Spanish, me salió el tiro por la culata. It backfired. They told me that they actually chose pieces that were different from their normal aesthetics because they were trying to expand the type of music that they play. And of course I felt like an idiot, not because the piece wasn't chosen, but because I realized that I was trying to please them instead of doing my own music. In very few words, the challenge is not to come up with an idea, but to understand it deeply enough that you can explain it clearly. Whenever you're trying to write a new proposal, yeah, be inspired by your colleagues, by other artists, but more importantly, look inside, look to your past projects, try to go deeper, because there, in my opinion, is where you will find the answer. So if you're sitting in front of a white screen thinking, how do I come up with a project, and not having any idea how to do it, stop searching on the internet. Take a moment to look inside of you, think about the past, the things that have mattered to you your whole life. And that is where you can actually create a project that makes sense for you. One that feels genuine, authentic, and a project that you would do no matter if you get money or not.